All right, welcome to MTG Friends. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Zach.
And in this episode, we're going to talk about the top 15 most broken and janky, not necessarily janky planeswalkers, but definitely the ones that are the most powerful, the most broken. We're going to tell you why and how they've been affecting the meta whenever they were in them. So, what are we going to start with?
We're going to start off with Ashiok Nightmare Weaver. This is a 3-drop from the original Theros block for 1 blue-black. With a 3 starting loyalty, you can uptick Ashiok by 2 to exile the top 3 cards of target opponent's library. You can minus Ashiok by X to put a creature card with converted mana cost X exiled with Ashiok onto the battlefield under your control. That creature is also a nightmare. And minus 10, exile all cards from all opponents' hands and graveyards.
So the first thing I notice about this card is that it's a 3-drop, and I've noticed that anytime MTG comes out with a 3-drop of a Planeswalker, it tends to be very, very powerful.
Yeah, it's very aggressively costed. Planeswalkers that come out turn 3 or earlier tend to be very hard to interact with and remove, because a lot of the time decks don't get set up fast enough to interact with those Planeswalkers early enough.
Right. Yep.
It's especially dangerous with a Planeswalker like Ashiok that is able to start stripping cards off the opponent's deck and then later reuse them for their own nefarious purposes. Like, that's...
Yeah, and I can see why this would
deal.
be popular in Commander, because it's a 3-drop, it's blue-black, so you can put all sorts of things around this.
Absolutely, and you can really kind of spread the love around for who you want to, deal with Ashiok. Something I especially like about Ashiok is that if your opponent tutors something that puts something on top of their library and they're not able to draw it, you can play Ashiok and just exile it and take whatever cool thing they put if it's a creature. Or just get rid of it permanently. It's an exile, and the odds of somebody being able to get that back is very low.
Yeah, we may need to do a deck tech on this one.
Yeah, can't be a commander, unfortunately, but it definitely finds a home in a lot of good decks that include blue and black.
Gotcha. Chandra, Torch of Defiance.
This card ripped up Standard when it was around. This card came out in, I believe, Kaladesh. It was either Kaladesh or Aether Revolt. It was in that block. It's a 4-drop for 4 loyalty, but it's also a 4 ability Planeswalker, which historically have been very powerful.
Yes. Absolutely.
And, Chandra, Torch of Defiance is no exception.
Yeah, it looks like...
She has 2 different +1s, which already is just an incredible amount of flexibility.
Sure.
She refunds you half her cost if you use her second +1, which is just adding red. And that's already incredible. You're playing an aggressive red deck that wants the mana in order to drop threats out. So normally, it feels bad to take turn 4 off to just play a Planeswalker. Being able to play your Planeswalker, uptick them, and then use 2 additional mana to do something, that's a lot of power.
Sure is.
Her other +1 allows you to essentially draw a card, and if you don't want to, you deal 2 damage to each opponent instead. So it lets you exile the top card and cast it. And yeah, if you decide not to, bam, you're just burning your opponents for 2.
Yeah, and I've noticed anytime you have an uptick like that, that does something beneficial like that, it always feels like it should actually be a downtick to me, which we'll mention in one of the most broken cards later in this episode.
Absolutely. This one's pretty reasonable, I think. Dealing 2 damage, drawing a card, those are both things that Planeswalkers can do, but it's just the fact that they were stapled together. You have the flexibility of either adding mana or drawing or dealing damage. Like, that's essentially 3 different abilities here. And that's a lot of power. Additionally, she has a -3 that deals 4 damage to a target creature, then a -7 that gives you an emblem that says whenever you cast a spell, that emblem deals 3 damage to any target. So basically, it turns every single spell into having a lightning bolt stapled onto it.
Oh boy,
Yikes. Very, very strong.
Yes. So the next one is Dack Fayden. It's also a 3-drop. It's in red-blue. And it's a target player draws 2 cards, then discards 2 cards for a +1. Now, that in itself, that's pretty much this one's a staple in Modern in a lot of decks, right?
I believe Legacy is where it gets a lot of play. I don't actually remember if it's legal in Modern at all. I don't play a lot of Modern, but I have occasionally paid attention to the meta. I think this is an older format card. But either way, a lot of those older format decks actually want cards in their graveyards.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to drop this, turn. I mean, realistically, you're going to play this like turn 1 or 2 in a really old school deck that has access to fast mana. But
Right.
a 3-drop comes in at 3 loyalty, upticks to 4 loyalty immediately, and essentially lets you go, okay, I got 2 cards in my hand I really want in my graveyard, or 2 cards in my hand that are trash and I don't want. Pitch them to the graveyard, draw 2 more. But the key is you draw the 2 cards first. This is looting, not rummaging.
Right.
So you get to see what your top 2 cards are first, and then like, hey, these are great. I want to keep these. You get to discard 2 others. It lets you really dig deep into your deck and set up your graveyard as well for whatever shenanigans you want to play there.
Right, which is far more powerful than a lot of the normal red spells, which you have to dump the cards first, then you draw the cards.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what red's slice of that part of the color pie is. It's called rummaging.
Right.
It's where you dump and then draw, while blue tends to get looting, which is draw and then discard.
Right, right.
And Dack also has 2 other abilities. They exist. The -2 is just gain control of target artifact, which I'd argue is actually pretty strong. It's, there's no limitations on what that artifact is, and so just being able to snag and steal an artifact, especially one that your opponent really wants to keep.
Yeah, even a mana rock.
And it only costs -2, so he still survives.
Yeah.
And then lastly, he has an ultimate, which is a -6. You get an emblem with which, whenever you cast a spell, the target's 1 or more permanents gain control of them.
Oy vey. That's ridiculous.
He's the greatest thief in the multiverse is his official title.
Yeah, that is.
So of course, everything about his card is about digging for treasure and then stealing all of it.
Yeah. Now,
does it work?
Now this next one is priced accordingly, and I don't mean financially speaking, but Elspeth Sun's Champion. It is a 6-drop. Comes out with 4 loyalty, and it is +1, put 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield. -3, destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. And -7, the ultimate, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +2/+2 and have flying. So,
yeah, this card is an absolute house. While it is 6 mana, this is essentially a finisher planeswalker.
Mm-hmm.
You put her out. You get 3 1/1 soldiers if you choose to use the plus. I mean, that is incredible defense for a planeswalker. It sounds silly, but it's hard to get by 3 creatures that your planeswalker just generated.
Yep, 3 chump blockers.
And then not to mention the fact that her minus removes big threats.
Mm-hmm.
So you down tick her by 3 and bam, everything power 4 or greater is gone. And when you're playing a white weenies deck, you're not going to have anything power 4 or greater.
Correct.
And I think most importantly, and just a sign of a really good design on this card, the ultimate that odds are you probably aren't going to use a ton. Planeswalker ultimates are hard to get off.
They sure are.
You get an emblem that gives your creatures +2/+2 and flying. And I really love the fact that the synergy between the +1 and the -7 work really well. You make 1/1s, they get +2/+2, which makes them 3/3s. And then that -3 only destroys power 4 or greater, so you'll still keep your 1/1s that are now 3/3s and flying.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cool combo.
Yeah.
And this card is just absolutely incredible. Has always been a powerful and really dangerous planeswalker. And it's one of those ones where your opponent drops at turn 6, you're going to want to remove that as soon as humanly possible because it will run over your game.
Yes. Absolutely. Speaking about a card that can run over your game, Gideon, Ally of Zendikar. It is a 4-drop, so it is probably underpriced in terms of mana, in my opinion. It comes out with 4 loyalty, and it's got +1 until end of turn. Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, becomes a 5/5 human soldier ally creature with indestructible. That's still a planeswalker. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. Now, if it already says he's indestructible, I'm surprised it follows it with prevent all damage. That seems like some...
So the reason it does that very specifically is because hypothetically, if he was dealt damage and he was still a planeswalker, which he is, he would take the damage and then loyalty counters would be removed, whether he's indestructible or not. Indestructibility essentially stops a creature from dying when their power and toughness are dealt damage and go below 0. It stops destroy effects.
Okay.
But loyalty counters are removed as a part of damage.
So
indestructibility doesn't prevent damage.
So that is a very good point to make in that text. Yeah.
Exactly. If he had not said prevent all damage that was dealt to him, you swing in with your 5/5. They block with a 5/5.
Mm-hmm.
Now the creature wouldn't die, but the moment he stops being a creature, he would die due to state-based actions because his loyalty would be 0.
Very good. So that's actually very important text on this card.
Funny thing about this card though is you will never use that +1 the turn he comes down because he doesn't have haste.
I got you.
So generally you're going to use that 0, which is to put a 2/2 white knight ally creature token onto the battlefield.
Gotcha.
And then his minus is an emblem with creatures you control get +1/+1,
which you can play immediately when he hits the battlefield.
Which is actually a major part of why this card was so powerful. Once again, very similar to Chandra, it is just the sheer unrivaled flexibility of this card.
Yeah.
It also doesn't help that in a Battle for Zendikar block, allies were the top deck and were just incredibly aggressive, incredibly powerful. And Gideon was just a planeswalker that did absolutely everything that they wanted. He himself gave himself the ally creature typing. He made an ally for you, and he buffed your troops.
And rarely do you ever have a planeswalker that hits the field and immediately can do its ultimate.
Yeah, that's pretty rare. Gideon tends to be the only one that's able to do that most of the time.
Yeah.
In terms of like making emblems. So if you're willing to drop him and sacrifice him, yeah, you basically just gave your whole team an anthem right off the bat.
Yeah.
This card was pretty much ubiquitous in Standard for Battle for Zendikar. He made sure that ally decks just reigned supreme.
Mm-hmm.
He was an absolute cornerstone of those decks and just a wildly, wildly powerful card.
Yes. Yep. Broken. Speaking of which, one of the earlier ones that was just so overclocked, Jace the Mind Sculptor for a 4-drop. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this one?
There's so much history that goes into Jace.
There really is.
In fact, he was banned for quite a while in a number of formats. He was actually recently unbanned, which is why he's been getting some new printings. But he is a 4-drop, 2 blue for a 3 loyalty planeswalker, but he was the first ever planeswalker to receive 4 abilities. And really what's so dangerous about this card is that in control shells already, he was just a huge threat due to the power and flexibility of each of his abilities.
Yes.
But the fact that he has 2 abilities that he can use immediately without losing any loyalty that either protect you, mess with your opponent, or even just give you card selection. So his +2, putting him right up to 5 loyalty, is look at the top card of target player's library. You can put that card on the bottom of that player's library. At first glance, this is, +2 to scry.
Right.
Except you can use it to Fate Seal instead, which is looking at your opponent's library. And there was never a worse feeling in formats where Jace was playable when your opponent would +2, look at the top card of your library, and then put it back on top.
Because you knew it was a land.
Just looked at that card and went, this is trash, and gave it to you.
Yes, gave you a land.
They didn't even want to risk letting you draw something that they didn't know. They knew this card is bad and you can have it.
Yeah. Well, and the +0 is really what makes this thing
It's a brainstorm.
Yeah.
That is brainstorm.
It's crazy.
Repeatable brainstorm.
Yeah, draw 3 cards and put 2 cards not in your graveyard, but put it back in your library. I mean, that's incredible that should have been a downtick.
Yeah. What's especially powerful about this, and also brainstorm, is in any format where you have the ability to reliably shuffle your library, aka fetch lands are around. This is essentially draw 3 cards, pick the 2 worst cards from your hand, put them into your deck, and then shuffle them away to never be seen again.
Yes, exactly.
The -1 is also just really fantastic. Bounce a creature. It doesn't seem insane, especially like this is an effect that's actually on a minus. Like, whoa, they remembered how to use minuses back in that day.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, it's really efficient. It's just a -1, puts him down to 2 loyalty. He's still around, and it bounces whatever the preeminent threat on the board is.
Yeah, it's just an unsummon that's on Jace.
Yeah.
And then it's -12, which you probably are never gonna trigger, but
no. But if you do,
you're probably laughing and chuckling, and you've just lost a friend you were playing with.
Because you are exiling every card in their library and then just putting their hand into their library.
Yes.
Shuffled into their library.
Yes.
It's just such a brutal ultimate because their deck is gone. The only things they have left to play is whatever was in their hand, and they don't even have their hand anymore. They have to draw it one random card at a time.
Yeah, there will be rage quitting at that point.
Yeah.
All right.
This card has historically been one of the most expensive planeswalkers to purchase because of the just sheer power and ridiculousness of this card.
Yep. All right, Karn Liberated. It is a 7-drop, so it's a little spendy, but it does a whole heck of a lot for 7. It +4s, which I mean, so you get to turn this thing from 6 loyalty into 7, 8, 9, 10. I was like, math. Target player exiles a card from their hand, and then it's -3, exile target permanent. And then it's -14, which you would think, oh, that's hard to get to. It's not when you're +4ing. Yeah. Restart the game, leaving in exile on all non-aura permanent cards exiled with Karn Liberated. Then put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. Yeah. I mean, that is so broken. Let's discuss how broken this is.
I mean, that +4 is insane. It actually doesn't even say target opponent. It says target player.
Yeah.
So you have something spicy in your hand. You can go ahead and exile it, and then 1 turn later, exile 1 more, whatever insane card you want, and then -14, and bam, you've just put them both onto the battlefield.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Your Ulamogs or your Eldrazi's that you've just exiled.
Yeah. And then that -3 is just super flexible. I mean, you can even exile lands with that.
Uh-huh.
But the -14, I think, is my favorite part about this, because this one actually isn't activated as much as you would think. Because hypothetically, while this is giving you a bit of a head start and definitely can win you the game with the right setup, this also does give your opponent a new grip of 7. It does start the game over with, a 20 starting life total. But if you can set up for it and you can really get those cards exiled, then I mean, sure, you're going to be very happy with it.
Well, and even it's -3. Let's say you +4 it on the first drop, and then next turn you go, okay, well, I have 10 to play with. Then you exile one of their permanents. I mean,
yeah. Well, and let's not forget that this card costs absolutely 0 colored mana, and is the backbone of Tron.
Yes.
Yeah, you play the 3 Tron lands and run this guy out as absolutely early as possible, or run another Planeswalker that we'll be talking about later out as early as possible. I mean, they're back-breaking cards.
Yes, they are.
Absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, he's worth it for that effect. It's just the fact that he's colorless makes him so dangerous. Definitely up there as one of the most powerful planeswalkers in the game.
Absolutely. All right, next one up is also a very powerful 3-drop. 3 drops.
Indeed.
Once again, if it's a 3-drop, it's usually overclocked in some level, and that's why it's on this list.
Just being able to run a walker out that early is scary.
Liliana of the Vale for 3 in black. It's +1. Each player discards a card, and most likely you're going to want to be discarding cards.
You're in black, of course you.
Yeah, -2.
Discard a card, and then you pay a mana and bring a single mana, and then you just reanimate it.
Yeah, so -2, target player sacrifices a creature. So it doesn't even, the Vale doesn't even die if you do its +1 or it's -2. And then it's -6, which is bananas, is separate all permanents target players controls into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents in the pile of their choice. I mean, that's disgusting. They lose half their board.
It's just a game you're playing with your opponent. You look at their board and separate it. I mean, what's especially nasty about this is you could hypothetically take all of their lands and put them in one pile, and then some of their permanents in the other.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you want to keep your lands, or do you want to keep your 2 creatures that I've left you with?
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
Icky.
Yeah. And I mean, even on its own, just the +1 over and over again is just, again, backbreaking, because you're discarding with purpose. You're in a deck that is built for that, and your opponent is not.
Yeah. Now this next one is one that at first I felt got snuck onto this list, but then when you started explaining it, it made 100% sense. And I've ran against this card in so many times in Standard. Narset, Parter of Veils, and as of this episode, this is still in. Is it still in Standard?
A couple more days, yeah.
Couple more days, but
I got like a week now.
It's so noteworthy. It ended up on this list. Yes, Narset, Parter of Veils. Go ahead.
For 1 blue, you get a 5 loyalty planeswalker that only has a single activated ability, but has one of the static abilities. This was in effect introduced in War of the Spark for planeswalkers, where they could have just abilities that happen just because they're on the board. And hers is crazy powerful. Each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn. Card advantage is one of the most powerful things you can leverage to your advantage in Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
Being able to have more cards in your hand and more options available to you at all times, and being able to draw cards from your deck to see more of those options is how you win the game. Yeah, sure, smacking people in the face with creatures does a lot, but you need the cards to be able to do that.
And that shuts down Euro. That shuts down Krasis, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it does. Krasis does not get to draw any cards because they've played it after they've drawn for their turn.
Oh, and there's nothing worse when you're on Arena and you're watching the cool little graphics and you forget that Narset is on the board, or you just you're not really paying attention, and then you drop like a Krasis or something and you see it turn red.
8 life,
draw 0 goose egg cards.
Nothing. Well, and then another thing that makes this card really excellent is the fact that her -2 essentially lets you search for answer pieces. You can't grab lands, you can't grab creatures, but you get to look at 4 cards, and you get to do this twice before Narset becomes too low to be able to downtick her again.
Yeah.
And you get to search for a non-creature, non-land from among them and put it in your hand. The rest just go on to the bottom of your library. So essentially, you can downtick her twice to play similar to Search to Azcanta, which was one of the most powerful enchantments into lands in Magic at the time in Ixalan. And you get to dig for counter spells, removal spells, draw spells, because you're not affected by that static effect.
Right.
And even funnier is if you're in a mirror match where both players have Narset, that minus is not draw a card. It's put into your hand, so you can still dig for answers.
Yeah, powerful card.
Very.
Especially when another Planeswalker we're going to mention here in a little bit was comboed with it. And we'll discuss that. But next up is Nissa, who shakes the world. Also rotating out very shortly in the meta, which is in probably 3 of the top 4 top meta decks.
Yeah, I've been watching the Mythic Championship, and she's had a very nice showing so far.
This thing is gross. I love playing it. I think it's I think it's properly costed, but the static ability is what really puts this thing above and beyond a lot of other cards. When you tap a forest for mana, it gives you 2 instead of 1.
Yeah, it gives you an additional green. Yep. And all it has to be is a forest. That's it.
And she
does cost 5 mana, and she does come in with 5 loyalty, but she defends herself.
But you get 2 of those back.
Yeah, hypothetically.
Your
land.
So
But her +1 puts 3 1/1 counters on a land, animates it into a creature, permanently makes your land into also a creature that's still a land, and it has vigilance and haste, so you can attack with it and then tap it for mana.
Well, and on top of that, you untap that land.
Yeah. So +1, make a 3/3. It has vigilance and haste, and also can probably tap for 2 green mana.
Yeah, which is just...
Or a black and a green, or a blue and a green, because you're playing Shocklands.
Yeah, that +1 is so powerful. You drop this thing on turn 5, which you've ramped up into, obviously.
You're playing it on turn 3 or 4 at that point.
Yeah, you're playing it on turn 3 or 4.
Turn 1, you're at 3 mana on turn 2. So you simply need to play 1 more Accelerator, probably a Cultivate, which gets you a land onto the battlefield and into your hand. You untap on turn 3, and you have a Nissa who shakes the world.
Well, and before Cultivate came back into Standard, we had the banned card, which was
Growth Spiral.
Yeah, Growth Spiral. Yep. So on turn 2, you Growth Spiral it, although you can't now because it's banned.
Exactly.
So you got this thing down on turn 3 or turn 4.
So easily. And then just the sheer mana ramp of getting essentially double mana on every single one of your forests in a format where we have lots of lands with basic land typing. The whole cycle of Shocklands, that's 4 lands that have forest in them. So it lets you really easily play into other colors.
And her -8 is really just anecdotal, because if you're making all of your lands indestructible, you're already well on your way to winning the game.
Yep. Because you've made them all into creatures. But the fact that she lets you search your library for any number of forests and just put them out tapped as well, why not?
It's ridiculous.
Why not just get every forest out of your deck?
Yeah, so that every card you draw is gas.
Yeah, I mean, it's hysterical. It doesn't even say basic forest. It's just Get all your shock lands too. Why not?
Yeah. So
Crazy.
next up is Teferi, Hero of Domineria.
Yes, indeed.
Now this is a great card. It's a 5-drop, so it's right around the right place you want it to be dropped in terms of mana cost.
Right,
oh yeah, plus
flashbacks.
+1, draw a card at the beginning of the next end step. Untap 2 lands. Oh man, that's powerful. -3, put target non-land permanent into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. That's obnoxious. And then it's -8 again. You're probably not going to be doing the -8, but you get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent an opponent controls.
You say you won't be doing that negative, but that negative was actually that ultimate was actually the wind condition when this card was in standard.
Oh, was it? Okay.
It's ridiculous. So everything about this deck was an Azorius or like Esper, maybe with some green in there instead. A control deck that did absolutely everything to stall out the game for as long as possible. Okay. It countered your threats. Mm-hmm. It ate your board, removed everything, bounced everything, essentially put you as behind as you possibly could be at all times. And then it drops Teferi.
Ugh.
So immediately that +1 draw card, you're untapping 2 lands. So you're going to have mana up to do things. So you plus them as much as you can, and then a certain little card called Nexus of Fate.
Oh gosh, I really hated that card.
So here's how this works. You're in a deck that's already trying to draw as many cards as possible. You are trying to keep your hand so full, no space in your hand. You know, you don't even care if you're discarding cards at end of turn. You're just trying to rip cards off the top of your deck.
Yeah.
Have counter spells up, have answers up at all times, get a ridiculous amount of lands out there, draw out the game for as long as possible, and then you start doing the worst thing.
Yeah.
You start using Nexus of Fate in an endless loop.
Yeah, I remember playing against
What makes Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, so important is the fact that he single-handedly stops you from losing the game if you Nexus too much. Combined with the fact that his ultimate, once you've gotten it off, says whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent and opponent controls. So what you would do is you would ult him, probably kill that Teferi, but you had another one. Or, you know, if you didn't kill that Teferi, you'd hang on to him, tick him back up until you get him to be able to -3 again. And then you infinitely Nexus of Fate, play your Nexus, shuffle it into your library, and then -3 Teferi and put himself 3rd from the top.
Mm-hmm.
So he would prevent you from ever decking yourself out. And then every time you cast Nexus or Teferi, you know, you get another turn, you draw another card, or you have Teferi out and you +1 and draw a card.
Mm-hmm.
And you slowly just completely remove your opponent's board.
That's icky. And it's nothing worse.
And then they would concede out of boredom.
Yeah, because there's nothing worse than just becoming a true spectator of a game where there's supposed to be 2 people playing.
It's solitaire. You have no chance to respond because they've countered all your spells.
Yeah.
They've removed all of your lands from existence. They're gone. They're exiled. And then they just take infinite turns right in front of you.
Boring.
This deck was a menace. And it ended up with Nexus of Fate getting banned out of the format. For good reason.
Yep, good reason. Speaking of a menace, also named Teferi, Time Raveler. This thing, it was a 3-drop. It was comboed with multiple things. I even, for a while, was running it on the ladder just because that's what I was running into.
Just a hateful magic card.
Yeah, a hateful magic card. Just the fact,
like a war crime.
Just the fact that it was a 3-drop. I was really surprised it got banned in standard right at the very end, not earlier. But here's what it does, in case you don't already know. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery. Oh, that's very difficult, man. That would shut down my Simic Wolves deck like you can't imagine. And then
you would like to play counter spells?
Yeah, no. Can't do it. Nope.
You would like to respond to any of my spells?
Nope. Yep. +1 until your next turn. You may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. Ugh.
Esper decks. Yeah. Esper decks made me want to cry. Back when Thought Erasure was the flavor of the month.
Yeah. Oh,
you could sorcery speed the Thought Erasure after your opponent's draw step before they had a chance to do anything.
Yeah. Just an obnoxiously powerful card, but a super cool powerful card if you were playing it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that -3 is great too. Return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand, and draw a card too, because why not?
Yeah, and it's target or return. Yeah, it's you choose.
Just to its owner's hand.
Yeah. Amazing.
Heck, if your opponent's stolen something from you, you can even use that on that and bounce it back to your own hand.
Which I had done
generally,
multiple
it was
times.
just used to stop like attackers that might come at him.
Yeah, keep him alive. So we'll just move right along from the Teferi brothers into Ugin, the Spirit Dragon, currently in Standard from a reprint. It's 8-drop, and this thing, oh man, let's just get right into what it is. It has 7 loyalty with all the ramp right now, and then we'll talk about this in the past. It is easy to get to 8 mana. It's +2, which really should be a -1 or a -2, maybe a -1. Is Ugin
even a 0 would have been fine.
Even a 0, but not a +2. Do 3 damage to any target. Oh man, so you could hit him in the face for 3 if they just need 3 left. You could remove one of their creatures. It's -X when it hits the board because it comes out with 7. Exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less. That's 1 or more colors. That's usually gonna be a Wrath, mostly.
But I mean, he's coming in at 7 loyalty, so
yeah, but even more than a Wrath.
CMC 7.
Yeah, because this is more than a Wrath because it's not just the creatures. It's other planeswalkers. It's artifacts, anything. And then
the only thing this doesn't hit is lands and colorless things.
Yeah, and
Standard is all full of colored artifacts right now. So sorry, guys.
And its ultimate, which is just crazy, is you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, then put up 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battle. I seem to always chuckle when I read something that is just crazy.
You just read it and you go, why?
And you go, what? So
who wrote this?
I just personally think this card shouldn't exist, but it does. I like playing it when it's appropriate. When it first came out, I had still been rage quit for a couple years in Magic. So tell me what this thing used to be like in the past, because now I could.
Well, back then it was in a format with fetch lands.
Okay.
So that was already really dangerous. It was in a format where colorless mana was pretty easy to come by. He wasn't like absolutely backbreaking at first, but then in Eternal formats he just started going nuts. Because just like Karn up above, Tron lands speed this thing out because it is colorless and requires absolutely no color intensity whatsoever.
Right.
So if you had the ability to make a bunch of mana, you played Ugin. That simple as that. And I mean that -X. This is ridiculous levels of flexibility here.
Sure is.
Ridiculously high loyalty, so you're not going to be answering him when he comes out.
Nope.
He has the plus that's just a nice easy bolt to the face, bolt to your creature, anything you want to bolt, you bolt. Even to any planeswalkers, you know, that's 3 damage to another walker. That's a lot.
Yeah, and just
that -X is the backbone of this card.
Yeah, but just that +1 is just really
+2.
Yeah, it's or yeah, +2, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
and the -10 is completely reasonable to hit and will just take over a game again.
Yeah. So that was probably very close to being in the top 2 here. Now these last 2 are, in our opinion, and a lot of the community in MTG, are the most broken, janky, I must say awesome cards, but broken because that's what this episode's all about. And we'll just we'll start with Oko, Thief of Crowns. A 3-drop, it wreaked havoc on the meta. It hit.
This card was a mistake.
This card was a mistake. So let's
it's for one single symbol on the card.
Yeah. So let's just talk about it being a 3-drop, which you could easily hit turn 2, especially when you had that golden goose.
Gilded goose in it.
Yeah, gilded goose. So you could be dropping this on turn 2, for goodness sake. +2 is create a food token, which is a +2 to get to your -5.
It's 6
to
loyalty.
6 loyalty on turn
3-drop.
2. Yeah, on a 3-drop.
Nobody is able to deal 6 damage to this thing in time.
No one. It was in almost every single deck in the championships. It was in, I think, don't quote me on this, but it was like in 70% of all the decks or something.
No, you're completely right. The format was you played Oko or you played to beat Oko.
Yeah, I mean, it was insane. It's +1. It would target artifact or creature loses all abilities and becomes a green elk creature with base power and toughness 3/3. So if it was a big creature, you'd turn it into a small creature without anything. If it was a small creature, you could make it a big creature.
Or the food token you just made.
Or the food token you could turn into a 3/3 to block for Oko. So you drop this on turn 2. You've already created a food token. Well, I guess you'd have to do that next turn. But
yeah, you make the food token the turn after you have a 3/3.
Yeah, so you have a blocker.
Here's where this card messed up. Actually, there's really 2 ways they could have solved this. The first is that pretty little plus symbol next to the number 1.
Yes.
If that had been a minus, I absolutely think this card would have been considerably more balanced.
Absolutely.
Because the follow-up mistake that Wizards made is they assumed everybody would elk their own stuff.
Yeah, and they
thought
wrong.
The play pattern for Oko was you play him, you make a food token, you turn that into a 3/3. Oh, maybe you just have a little creature that you're not using anymore. Maybe that Gilded Goose, you're not really using it for mana anymore. Sure, we'll make that a 3/3. That food token, I don't need that. We'll make that a 3/3.
Yeah,
seems fine, right? But the problem is, it just says target artifact or creature. It doesn't say target artifact or creature you control. So your opponent plays a big threat. No, I think I'm going to make that an elk. Target plays a Bolas's Citadel, a giant artifact that they really want. No, I'm gonna make that an elk.
And then you could steal it if you wanted to.
Exactly, at -5. And not to mention this is in blue and green. Green, having that very unique property of being able to ramp like crazy and have giant creatures. So giving your opponent a 3/3 doesn't seem all that great until you have a 6/6 sitting on your board that can block it, eat it, and kill it.
Yes, indeed. I mean,
this card was absolute nuts.
And then it got banned in other formats, and I think
and standard.
Yeah, I think you can still play it in Commander and stuff, but it loses its power in Commander. But it's still a powerful card in Commander.
Yeah, I mean, I still play it in Commander. Yeah. But it is banned in Modern, Pioneer, Brawl, and Standard. The only places you can play Oko are Legacy, Vintage, and Commander.
Which
and I think he's banned in Historic as well.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it about that card. It was a mistake. We both agree. The community agrees. I do think that the downtick would have saved this card from getting banned. I don't even think making it a 4-drop would have fixed that.
Well, and here's where I think another major mistake with this card came in, and that's the fact that the +2 is a +2, allowing this to go up to 6 loyalty. In the previous set that came out before Eldraine, they printed a whole bunch of really good color hate cards. One of those was a card called Fry. It was 2 mana, 1 in a red, couldn't be countered, and it dealt 5 damage to target blue. I think it was like blue or white creature or planeswalker.
Right.
And it existed kind of as an off switch for a lot of the really powerful War of the Spark planeswalkers that were really messing up the meta. You play your Narset, I fry that, it's gone. You can draw cards again, it's safe.
Yes.
Oko Thief of Crowns ticks up to 6 and is now comfortably 1 out of fry range.
Yep, and just keeps on rolling.
You not only have to have a fry in your hand and ready to go.
You have to have a shock as well.
2, 3. But then you also have to have a shock. You have to have a creature that can hit him. He protected himself way too well.
Yep.
He was really fun to play in draft when you got a bunch of that weapon rack, which was the artifact that put 1/1 counters on itself. Yeah. And then you just turn it into a 3/3 elk, but what's that? It still has 1/1 counters on it, but now it's a creature. Here's a 6/6 on turn 3.
Yeah, I was always excited to crack one of those in draft, which only happened one time for me.
Yep, only one as well, but I also sold it for $80, so I wasn't really all that upset with it.
Before it dropped into oblivion.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's now about $14.
Oh my goodness. I have one of the alt art ones.
So, nice.
So
very nice.
All right, now this last one on our list. So this one and Oko are the absolutely most broken.
So I'm actually gonna cut you off there. We actually spoiled ourselves by accident early on by reading out Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Yes, we did.
Jace was supposed to be in the slot, but we are gonna read off our last one, which is another planeswalker that I would argue is in like the top 3 most powerful planeswalkers of all time.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is Wrenn and Six. It is a single red and a single green. This is only one of technically 3 2-drop planeswalkers. The other ones being Tibalt the Fiend-Blooded, which is considered probably the worst planeswalker of all time. And then the other is a planeswalker that you can never play on turn 2 because she instantly dies, Nissa, Steward of Elements, which costs X green blue. So you won't play that turn 2. Any other planeswalkers that are cheap enough to play on turn 2 are flip walkers, and so they aren't walkers when you play them.
Yeah, so throughout this episode, we've been talking about 3 drops make these so powerful, but a 2-drop makes it over the top for sure.
And what's horrifying about this card is this was a card that was printed in Modern Horizons specifically for modern and older formats. And this card looked really innocent at first. 2 mana, 3 loyalty, yeah, that's fine, you know. Just return a target land card from your graveyard to your hand. It deal 1 damage. You know, that -7, you're never going to get there. This is just a lands planeswalker. People are only going to play this in, like, Lord Windgrace Commander. No. Wasteland. Strip Mine. You crack it, you +1 a Wrenn and Six, and hey, it's back in my hand. We're going to do it next turn.
Yes.
That 1 damage is actually a lot more significant than it seems as well, because in formats like these, you're playing lots of mana dorks, playing lots of small creatures with a little toughness, and Wrenn and Six just comes out and pings them to death.
Yeah.
And once again, the fact that this comes out on turn 2 is just ridiculous. This is so hard to interact with.
Yeah.
And while it has no inherent built-in protection, it does not need it. It allows you to absolutely destroy opponents in the right settings. Wrenn and Six is absolutely a monster. And to this day still costs about $50 if you wanted to get a hold of a single copy of this thing.
Yep.
And it really just shows how a low mana cost creates an absolute monster out of a planeswalker that otherwise feels like it should be fairly harmless.
Exactly.
Oh, and not to mention that that ultimate is actually pretty cool too. You're almost never gonna use this ultimate. It's not that I think it's like a bad ultimate or anything. It's just the 7 loyalty. You know, that's a lot, and you're probably actually gonna want to do your +1 or your -1 a lot more.
Yeah.
But it gives you an emblem that says instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard have retrace, which is an effect that allows you to discard a land card and then pay the cost of the card in your graveyard, and you get to cast it.
Which is very powerful.
And it doesn't exile the card, so you can keep doing it. So it essentially turns your land cards into a copy of spells in your graveyard. It's a super cool effect. I can't really think of a situation where I've seen it used.
So basically, Zach and I are saying that Wrenn and Six, Teferi Time Raveler, and I suppose Jace the Mind Sculptor, because yeah, it's kind of a given that one is just one of the most powerful. So those 3, in no particular order, are the absolute most broken planeswalkers of all time.
Yeah.
And we happen to love them.
Wrenn and Six is actually one of my favorite planeswalker designs of all time.
Yeah.
I think it's really cute because it's a low drop. It seems so harmless, and then it just ruins your day.
Yes, absolutely.
It's silly, but I love it.
So if you see a planeswalker that you really love, you didn't see it in the episode, put it in the comments. If we see enough comments, we'll do another episode about broken planeswalkers. Thanks for tuning in. Be a friend of the gathering and check out our other stuff. We enjoy doing these, so let us know what you think.
Yeah, thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.